Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, August 26th, 2025. Tonight's broadcast, which I'm calling, in fact, when I sent out the invite, I tweaked the name a little bit because I wanted to make it more clear about what I would be speaking about this evening. Tonight's broadcast is understanding the relationship between our symptoms and the authentic self, what it means to be who we are, and how those symptoms not are not a barrier or not something that's in the way of this discovery, but they're actually something that can lead us to the discovery or the connection to our authentic self. So before I get into that, let me go over the housekeeping items. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you're interested in doing a deep dive into your own work, Finding You, the next available offering is September 3rd. I think we have one spot left if you want to sign up for that last minute. We have an online version September 19th, which is about half the time and about a third of the cost, and you don't have to travel. So if that's something that means something to you, then that is one wonderful offering. And then after that, we have one starting in the beginning of October, November, and December. Go to our website for more information. If you're interested in a private intensive for a couple, for a family, or even for an individual, go to our website or contact us on our email, info@findingyouprograms.com. Something new for the alumni of our intensives is our monthly support group. So our next support group will be September 17th. You should get that invite. If you don't get that invite, you can reach out to us and make sure that you're getting those monthly if you are an alumni of our intensive program. If you're interested in a therapist or a coach who can help you on your journey, guide you on your journey, give you support on your journey, and who understands the kind of work, the kind of approach that we use here at Finding You, you can reach out to us on our website or using that email. I'm so excited. I'm going to be at the Omega Institute this fall with my daughter, Emma. We are going to be running the Audacity to Be You workshop. That's in Rhinebeck, New York, at a beautiful facility. 4.5 days, October 12th through 17th. It is a very affordable experience, around $500, depending upon whether you're a member or not, but within range of that. If you're interested, go to the Omega website at eomega.org. That's eomega.org. Check it out there and sign up. I'm very excited if you're attending live. What that means is that you are a member of the Inner Circle. Either you're an alumni or you're subscribing. The Inner Circle is a subscription-based and support of the podcast. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. So if you're interested, you want to be have access to private episodes that don't get released to the public, or you want to attend any of these live, including the Ask Me Anything episodes, one of which I'll be holding this Thursday, then go to our website or email us at that email that I keep reminding you of, info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're an alumni, again, you should be automatically enrolled in that. So with that housekeeping, let's get into tonight's broadcast. Symptoms and the search, the connection to our authentic self. There's an idea really that I'm going to say and share with you throughout the broadcast that I like to think of it in this kind of poetic sense. The way that I say it is that you are the medicine, you are the home that you are seeking. That what ails you, what keeps you anxious, depressed, looking for self-medicating behaviors is that disconnect from the authentic self, and that those symptoms, anything from something as minor and small as biting your fingernails to something more serious like a substance use disorder or dangerous behavior, can be something that can tie you back to the authentic self, to the unmet needs, to the self that you were meant to be in the beginning and have abandoned for the sake of attention, for belonging, and when I say attention, let me go back. I don't mean the way that we often talk about attention in a negative sense. Sometimes I've heard it said of people that are struggling with mental health issues that they're just seeking attention, as if that's a bad thing. In fact, I hear so much of that kind of derisive language today when talking about young people, that they're doing it for the attention. But when you peel back just a little bit, you see that everybody wants attention. Everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to feel connected and belonging. That is a fundamental trait of being a human, of being a Homo sapien, that we belong in groups, that being connected to others gives our nervous system something to rely on, something to find comfort in. Something as simple as listening or as intimate as a hug is a way for Homo sapiens to borrow from others' nervous systems to find calmness, to find peace, to find some sort of serenity. So the thing that we seek in therapy, the way that we talk about therapy here at Finding You, is that the thing that you are seeking, that seems like it's out there, right? It's the journey that looks like in storytelling, something you do out there, go searching for it, that really what you're seeking is a connection to yourself, a deep connection to yourself, which will, in many cases, be experienced by the seeker as a connection to a higher power, to God, to the universe, to each other. Oftentimes, Eastern religious teachers will have this idea that there is no self. And I don't want you to worry about that idea tonight, because really what they're talking about is the self is something that is connected to the universe, to the great everything, ultimately to each other. That empathic pain that we feel when we hear about or see somebody else suffering is this evidence that we are, in a sense, spiritually connected to the other. That in some simple ways, watching somebody else suffer and feeling the pain inside of us is evidence that it is us, our extended self, that is feeling that. It's happening to us. So the pilgrimage, the story in Heroic Journeys, is really a pilgrimage back to you. And when you find that self, when you are able to shed off all the barriers that stand in the way to that connection to self, that the fear, the shame, the judgment that you've experienced in your life, when you are able to shed or slough off those layers, that shell, that armor, and you find that connection to yourself, everything else makes sense. This is what is meant in the poetic language of Rumi when he says, I searched for God and found nothing for myself. I searched for myself and found nothing but God. Or in another place where he says that the search for your authentic soul, for the soul, will end all other desires. The desire for the soul will end all the desires. When we find ourselves, when we become who we are, everything else makes sense. Everything else feels peaceful. So that's what I'll be talking about tonight. And I'm going to be talking about it. What I like to do, as many of you know, is I like to borrow from several different philosophies and artists and teachers to show you that it is really just one truth. Where I was first introduced to the idea of symptoms being that trail of crumbs back to the self that we follow to find ourselves was when I was in graduate school and we were studying marriage and family therapy and the creators, the pioneers of family therapy, family systems theory, specifically with regard to the Mental Research Institute in Palo Alto, California, which was founded in 1967. This was a period where the key founders, some of which were Don Jackson, Jay Haley, and Virginia Satir, that their vision was to watch families and to watch how they got stuck. What was it? What was the mechanism that seemed to be broken or misfiring, that family systems seemed to get stuck in? And what they discovered was that it wasn't the trauma event. It wasn't that somebody got sick or lost their job. It wasn't that somebody got hurt by a certain action over another, but it was in how they went about trying to solve the problem that became the area where they got stuck. Early on, the folks in the Mental Research Institute utilized systems theory, and they focused on the interactions between people, right? This was a departure from individual psychology, where we looked at individuals. We dissected individuals down to their most elementary parts. And in the systems theory, they understood that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, that this person marrying this person didn't add up to two, but added up to something qualitatively different. And all of us have some of that experience. You know that when you walk into different contexts and in different relationships, that the thing that is the whole of you, the relationship, is much different. You can walk into a professional setting and feel very empowered, feel very capable. When in contrast, you can walk into, say, like, let's say a family reunion or go back to your parents' house and find yourself feeling that regressive pull back to a more primitive way of operating, of relating to other people. So they started to study the relationship between the individuals. That was the magic. That's where it got stuck. That's where it could be healed. And as they did this, they started off by just observing families. They used closed circuit TV just to observe individuals, sometimes actually placing professionals within the home, silently just watching the family. And they came up with this idea that I was speaking to. What they called it was attempted solution sequences. This concept was developed as a way to understand how individuals and families often attempt to solve problems through repeated patterns of behavior. MRI theorists observed that these attempts often reinforce the problem rather than resolve it. You know how drinking can feel really relaxing, that drinking can feel like it takes away your anxiety, but you wake up the next morning with the same anxiety, with the same fears that were temporarily put to rest through the alcohol, and you add to that the headache that you have the night before. That's what we're talking about. That what looks like it solves the problem, what looks like it medicates the problem, that it addresses the problem, actually becomes a bigger problem. Through this approach, through this observation, the MRI group laid the groundwork for modern brief therapy. They were the ones who said we can treat the symptoms because we see the symptoms as these failed attempted solutions. And this goes in line with what we're understanding and learning about trauma these days, what we're hearing people talk about with trauma these days, that it's not what happened to you, but rather whether or not you were left alone in your trauma, whether or not you were able to borrow from somebody else's nervous system to find regulation, to find safety, to find peace. That's what the MRI folks first started to discover, was that if you couldn't find that attachment experience, that co-regulation, but instead found some way to avoid, to distract, to temporarily medicate the anxiety, the fear, the pain that came from the event, that often developed into a pattern so that the alcohol becomes its own problem in this experience. That's what the MRI group discovered, these attempted solution sequences. So when I'm meeting with a client, there are two things that I'm paying attention to. The first thing that I'm noticing is that the problem is not the symptom. In a way, the symptom is that person's solution. So no matter how odd or awkward, no matter how socially unacceptable this attempted solution sequence is, I see it through the compassionate eyes of this group, and I understand that is their best attempt to solve the problem, to find a way to temporarily alleviate the anxiety. And so to pull that crutch, that thing that gives them temporary support, to rip it away from them, is a very unkind and in fact judgmental act. Instead, we try to offer them healing, offer them some sort of soothing. We take in the child or the client or the partner's distress. We take it into us, meaning we listen to it. We hear the story. And because of our perspective, because of where we are positioned, because of our experience, as the analysts say, because of our broader experience, we're able to metabolize their distress and to feed back a sense of okayness to the individual. We seek to heal or to give peace with that wound in such a way that they don't need the crutches anymore. They don't need the self-medicating behaviors before. And that's a very, very critical aspect of trauma-informed therapy. And this is perhaps the most important, interesting, I think, thing that I can tell you this evening. It's not the things that happen to us. There's a very popular book out, endorsed, I think, co-authored by Oprah Winfrey and a psychologist that she has a great deal of respect for. And I think the book has a good idea in it. I believe the title of it is What Happened to Us? What Happened to You is the title. Bruce Perry is the co-author along with Oprah. And it's a good idea. It's getting people to understand that trauma, that our trauma responses that are inappropriate or unhealthy or self-destructive behaviors are our best attempt to solve the problem. But more important than anything I can tell you tonight is that it's the way in which a family, a system, a culture, a group supports somebody who's going through a painful experience that will make the difference. If you express anger and hurt towards your parents and they respond with what is a very common response, something like you're making something out of nothing, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, you're too sensitive, that's just your anxiety, you're being ridiculous, you're being silly, those kinds of responses. And while those might seem too dramatic for some of you, if that kind of energy, that kind of dismissive, discounting energy is how you are received, gaslit essentially, that's when the trauma then becomes something that is the root of the mental illness, the mental health problem, because you don't have that nervous system, because the parent is too threatened or insecure. It's their ego that is being threatened when you're mad at them, for example. So they gaslight or dismiss your feelings. They are not the adult in the room, the big person. So then we have to find other ways to manage this intolerable pain feeling. So we look to things that are at an instant anesthetizing to us, right? They take away the pain, they numb the pain, they distract us from the pain. But over time, those become the problem. Those become the diagnosis. Those become the mental illness. So it's not the big T trauma. It's really the small T trauma, the soup that you were cooked in, the culture in the family, the way that parents responded to your distress, your upset. That's the mechanism that we understand in trauma-informed therapy. So that when you walk into a therapist's office, if you are lucky enough to find one who can sit with you without trying to solve the problem, without trying to dismiss it, without minimizing, if you find one that can sit with you, you begin to develop what theorists call this earned attachment. Therapy becomes the childhood that you did not have. The therapist becomes the parent that you did not have. And through repeated exposure to such a person, you're able to integrate. You're able to find soothing and comfort within your own body. I am very emphatic when I say that the message that sometimes is given in the world, hopefully not by many therapists, that you have to find love for yourself first, that self-esteem is an inside job. I'm very emphatic to say that's not how Homo sapiens are built. Homo sapiens are built to borrow from other Homo sapiens energy from that nervous system. And why this is so important tonight, this process of big T and little t and kind of the dynamic between them. The reason that this is so important is because that really is the mechanism of healing also. It's the mechanism of developing a sense that you are okay. And so when you come to therapy, of course, the therapist is going to ask about the big T trauma. And if you have the trust in the process, you'll tell them the story, and probably not once. In fact, in one way, metaphorically, you'll tell them the story over and over and over again. And if the therapist is inclined, as I am, to understand that this is a process by which somebody heals is by telling their story and by having it heard, metabolized, and the energy is reflected back that you're okay. I don't panic. I don't get disgusted. I don't gasp in fear. I don't frown in disgust. I don't judge if I'm doing the job well. I just listen. I just hear. I might even mirror back feelings that you're expressing, or maybe even feelings that you have suppressed. And in so doing, I let you know that you're okay. It is painful. It was traumatic. It was worthy of the big feelings that you had. So small t is really the stuff. It's really the important stuff. You see, people that experience big T traumas, but yet have this kind of healthy family process, their big T traumas are mitigated. They're buffered. They're lessened. They dissipate. They don't disappear. You still have the memory. You still remember it, but it doesn't live in your body as a trauma in a sense. You don't find yourself reacting to people and circumstances and situations that unconsciously or consciously remind you of it, because you're okay. It's the soup that we were cooked in. It's the air that we breathed. It's the culture that we lived in. It's the way that we were responded to. That's what the Mental Research Institute folks discovered and explained. Let's go over to cognitive behavioral therapy. In cognitive behavioral therapy, this idea is referred to as a behavioral chain analysis. This is the concept used to understand the sequence of events leading to a specific behavior, specifically within CBT. We identify the triggers, the thoughts, the emotions that contribute to a typical behavior. And by mapping out this chain, by understanding that when something happens to you, it triggers this thought. Somebody closes the door on you while you're talking to them, and you have a very large reaction to it, which is an indication that there's some historical example, some historical pattern of you being shut out, of being ignored, of you being abandoned, of you being dismissed. And by mapping out this change, you understand this is what happened to me. See, that's how trauma shows up. Not by the stories that we tell, sometimes that happens, but by the way that we react to everyday events. As they say in Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And I want to pause and explain something right now to all of you. My explanation of this does not heal you. It is an experience that heals you. You can understand the absolute details, mechanics of a broken leg. But no matter how well you could articulate, understand, speak to the science of it, that doesn't fix the broken leg. Something has to be done, right? It needs to be set. It needs to be cast or splinted. You need to take weight off it. Eventually, you might need to go to physical therapy. You have to go through an experience. So the interpretations in psychotherapy are not the magic. I just think that they're interesting material along the way. They encourage us to go back to this experience over and over again. So the behavioral chain analysis is the way that behaviorists talk about this experience. And we can learn to, first of all, understand the function of the symptom. What does this behavior serve? What's the unmet need? Why does the person use this way of coping when we can see logically, even they can see logically, it's self-sabotaging. It's self-damaging. When somebody says to me, why does my child act this way? Why does my spouse talk this way? My response is, of course, that's a wonderful question. But most important in asking that question is to know they have a good reason. But you have to be large enough. That means you have to be settled enough. If you are anxious because you lack an anxious attachment, you can't offer that to your child. And you will inevitably, unfortunately, need the child or the spouse or the friend to be okay, or the client for that matter, to be okay so that you're okay. You have to have had either a secure attachment to some degree or this earned attachment through psychotherapy to be able to offer it to somebody else. Or I suppose, well, I was going to say that you might have had no trauma in your life, but that doesn't exist. So even in cognitive behavioral, we understand that this attempted solution, the way that we go about solving our problem, becomes the problem. One of my favorite modern psychological theories, referred to casually as NARM, which stands for Neuroaffective Relational Model. That's actually easier to say than colloquially. I'm not even going to try to say that. Casually. I can spell it, I think. But NARM aims to identify and explore the sequences of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that contribute to psychological issues. They seek to illuminate how past experiences influence current behaviors. You see, as I'm going along in these theories, they start to go back to our history. NARM encourages individuals to gain insight into their emotional and behavioral patterns. Why do you do what you do? By increasing this awareness, by becoming more conscious, the individuals understand the causes of their difficulties in a much different way. They put a great emphasis on early trauma and relational trauma, this small t. Small t is sometimes called relational trauma, developmental trauma, small t trauma. It's all the same thing. How does the attachment, what was available to you to soothe? Were the big people around you too anxious to be able to soothe you themselves? Or could they offer the energy, the calming energy of their own nervous system to you? Could they listen to your anger, your sadness, your fear, without they themselves feeling the panic or the stress of it? Did they have enough psychological depth and breadth and experience to offer you that sense that you will be okay? It won't be easy, but you'll be okay. NARM looks closely at how these early experiences shape one's sense of self and relational patterns. NARM, again, like the kind of therapy that I talk about and teach, attachment-based therapy or analytical informed therapy, understands that the relationship between the professional is the reparative fuel. The relationship between the big person and the child is the thing that leaves its mark one way or the other. The good news about this idea that small t relational trauma is the thing that we're looking at and studying, it means that you don't have to prevent bad things from happening with all of your resources, right? A lot of us, because we don't have this kind of earned attachment, the secure attachment, we spend all of our energy trying to control everything outside of us. We try to prevent bad things from happening to us and to our family because we have no other ideas about how to weather the storm. But if you develop this nervous system regulation through repeated contact with somebody who's able to offer that co-regulation to you, right? It wires your body for safety. Then you don't need to control outside events. You don't need to spend your time managing what people say and do and think. You don't go into a panic when your child steps out into the world, because you know that even if something unfortunate happens, you can deal with it. And you can deal with it because you've dealt with other things like that. It's really critical. It's fundamentally critical for me to explain to you now that this is the reason why the unowned anxiety, meaning the unconscious, not named, not a situation where the parent doesn't take responsibility for their own fears. The unowned anxiety is the heaviest burden for a child to carry. The child thinks that something is wrong with them when a parent is anxious. They're not able to, at least at the early stages of childhood, they're not able to say, well, I just have an anxious father. I just have an anxious mother. They have an experience that something is wrong. Something's unsettled inside of me. It feels like shame. It feels like poor self-image. So that's why it's our job as partners and as parents, as friends, coworkers, citizens, neighbors. That's why it's our job to take responsibility for our own anxiety, our own fears, our own healing, our own histories, our own trauma, so that we're not adding this to the world. We're not spilling out into the world the fears and unsettled aspects, energies of our own nervous system. In attachment theory, which is the theory that I talk about and teach from, attachment-based therapy specifically targets the quality of attachments formed early in life, such as the attachment styles that are often described as secure or anxious or avoidant. It examines how these styles affect current relationships and emotional well-being. Attachment-based therapy often involves creating a secure therapeutic relationship to help clients explore and process their attachment related issues. The therapist acts as the secure base to facilitate healing. So you go to the therapist, you confess some horrible act, you share some really vivid trauma, and they respond with warmth, with a kind of confidence, a confidence in life, in the idea that you'll be okay, that it'll be painful, that there will be grief, there'll be deep and profound feeling, sometimes of pain and sadness, hurt, but there's a confidence in life that you'll be okay. That's what attachment-based therapy teaches. That's the practice of attachment-based or analytically informed therapy. Freud would argue that patterns of behavior stem from these unresolved conflicts in childhood. There was an expectation of how you should be and think and feel versus how you do think and feel. Freud introduced these concepts and the idea of defenses, which are the unconscious strategies used to protect the ego from anxiety. Understanding these mechanisms could help identify the underlying causes of maladaptive behaviors, similar to how behavioral chain analysis seeks to uncover triggers and responses. See, this was the original idea in talk therapy. But Freud and Jung are kind of hard to understand. They seem very theoretical, very obtuse, non-concrete, too abstract for people. So people have come up with more modern examples. But it goes back to the same idea. Freud recognized that the concept of transference, about how the client feels toward the therapist, project onto the therapist's their own past, right? I assume that my therapist will respond the way my family of origin did. I assume when I talk about a binge episode, when I talk about self-harm, when I talk about some great mistake that I made, I assume that the therapist is going to respond like my parents did, with judgment or fear or overwhelm or anxiety. So the therapist in analytically informed therapy and attachment-based therapy and Freudian therapy understands that that experience teaches us about the childhood in ways that the client can't quite explain. And when we show up in a different way with a different response repeatedly over time, the individual starts to have a different kind of self-image. They feel differently about themselves. They feel okay about themselves. Freud said a thing which has not been understood inevitably reappears. Like an unlaid ghost, it cannot rest until the mystery has been resolved and the spell broken. Freud was an amazing writer. So it's not the symptom. The biggest mistake in the context of tonight's broadcast is if we just go to manage symptoms, which it's understandable, right? Symptoms are a problem. Drinking is a problem for many people. Aggression is a problem for many people. Self-harm is life-threatening, right? These are real, difficult symptoms to bear, to deal with. But Freud understood if you don't get to the heart of the matter, if you don't pull the weed up by its roots, if you don't go back to what we now understand because the science that we have that we didn't have when Freud was alive, that the core wiring of the individual's brain and nervous system were in some ways very well set a long time ago. Sometimes when I'm working with parents who are parenting adolescent and young adult children, I'll often say, to illustrate the point, the damage is already done. I say it when that kind of statement doesn't feel negative or terrifying. I say the damage is already done. In other words, you can let go of your crusade to prevent or to fix your child and work on your nervous system. The number one thing you can do to contribute to any healthy relationship, most importantly, most specifically, the parenting relationship with the child, the most important thing you can do is work on your nervous system. And the way that I teach to do that is to go to therapy, to find somebody who's bigger than you, to find somebody who can hold you, hold space for you. Sometimes people tell me, well, people lie to their therapist. And we know that, especially those of us who have been in therapy. We know it's a battle. We know it's a terrifying prospect to go into therapy and to tell the truth about yourself. And the reason it's such a precarious task to tell the truth, is because we are sure at an unconscious level, if not conscious, that the therapist is going to respond the same way that our parents or the big people who raised us, the big people who were around when we were young, responded. And so we think that we can sell the therapist on how good we are, how healed we are, right? We assume that's what they're looking for because that's what the big people were looking for when we were young. But that risk, that moment, when a client says to me, I know I shouldn't say this, or I know that this is bad, or I know that I should feel a certain way. But the minute that they say that, I know we're about to get the gold, the treasure, the truth. And if that information that they share is toward me, the therapist, like I'm mad at you, I'm hurt, I'm frustrated, I didn't like our last session, I didn't like something you said last week. If they have the courage to risk to say that thing, then we have the most wonderful opportunity of all. If we've done our work, to say to the client, I am so glad you told me. It must have been scary for you to say something like that. I feel honored that you would be willing to share that with me. Thanks for telling me. And we say sorry where we can. We say we'll try better. But more importantly than promising improvement or change, we just honor the truth. And if we do this well, the client begins to think that things can be different. And then they start to measure all of their interactions by that experience. If you're allowed to be mad at the authority figure, if you're allowed to be mad at the parent, if you're allowed to be disappointed in the parent, hurt by the parent, then you have a different experience about what it means to be who you are. You don't think that you have to sacrifice, to repress, to suppress those thoughts and feelings and ideas just to ensure proximity and closeness to other people. You learn something really unique from most people, which is I can be myself and still be loved, which I thought was impossible before. And now I'm beginning to have hope because I'm having that experience in psychotherapy. Freud taught that the outcome of successful therapy ultimately is freedom. Specifically, freedom from unconscious obligations. The shoulds or the shouldn'ts, right? You should feel this way. You shouldn't feel this way. This is how you should parent. This is how you should, what you should do in marriage. This is the right, the wrong, right? All of those rules. And in psychotherapy, because the therapist is larger, ideally large enough to be able to hold the client, then the person learns that what they thought was right and wrong was just a construct. It was contrived. It was artificial. It was some person's idea. We learned that our childhoods weren't normal. They were just the childhood that we had. My daughter talked about this. My 17-year-old talked about this recently in one of her courses, one of her classes in high school. She explains this, that these notions of good and bad, right and wrong are social constructs. These are her words. That they are contrived. And that they are worthy of our reevaluation. Are they true for me? I've had parents say, this is our family value. And I've often gently corrected them to say, these are your values, which are just fine. But your child might not have the same idea about cleanliness, about education, about gender, about whatever it might be. about what's acceptable. And thank heavens that our children continue to expand, to travel far toward the horizon of our awareness, of our consciousness. You know, it's what Jack Black said when he was just, I saw this quote recently when he was listening to his child's music, and it was making him uncomfortable. And he had to remind himself, the music of my children is supposed to make me uncomfortable. It's supposed to push the envelope. If children become who we think they should be, then they're just going to repeat our lives. So we have to stretch, we have to grow, we have to transform. We have to find new versions, new horizons for ourselves. So how does one become freed from these unconscious obligations, these shoulds and shouldn't? J.D. Gill said it this way. In psychotherapy, the experience of seeing one's base from a different perspective can be profound. One way this happens is by allowing ourselves to be honest and open with someone who does not react the way our parents did. For example, she says, what was very bad at home is now nothing. The difference in experience allows for the realization that things could be different. One's assigned position in one's past is not necessarily one's assigned position in the universe. This is the experience of psychotherapy in the way that we talk about it at Finding You. What I love about our intensives, and I explain this when I run one, is the insights are wonderful. The awarenesses that come to you are amazing. But most importantly, I want you to remember what it feels like to be safe enough to tell the truth about things that normally you think you need to hide to find acceptance. I want you to remember what it feels safe enough in the way that we talk and relate to each other during this 4.5-day experience. So that when you go out in the world, you're looking for that feeling again in your relationships. You're looking for that non-judgment, that safety. I love this quote written by Shahida Arabi. A child that's being abused by its parents doesn't stop loving its parents. It stops loving itself. The child experiences the parent's distress, which the parent will often tell the child, well, it's just because I love you. I'm just worried for your well-being. But the child doesn't experience it like that. They experience the distress as the parent is, I am showing up in such a way that is intolerable for you. Something must be wrong with me. That is the unconscious nature of this small t trauma and this healing of attachment-based therapy. And it doesn't matter the theory, the technique. If this fundamental glue, this fundamental process that I'm describing is not attended to, the technique will be utterly meaningless. The client will sense that they need to show up a certain way for the therapist to feel good about themselves and the work that they're doing. And they will repeat the childhood pattern of distorting who they are, repressing who they are in order to find acceptance. To heal, this is from the Journey of the Heroic Parent, to heal, the therapy client must re-experience themselves in the presence of an empathic other. This experience will create self-compassion in the client and expand self-awareness. Like I said, what Freud suggested was the goal of therapy, freedom. This is how it is done. We are received, we are contained, we are held, we are seen. Without the terror, without the fright, without the disgust, but just with capacity. Essentially what I'm talking about is shame. Shame is, in essence, the separation from the authentic self, which sometimes in mythology is described as separation from God. In The Audacity to Be You, I borrowed from the King James edition of the Bible, the story in Genesis. And here's what I borrowed. It says, and the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaf together, and they made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And God said back, Who told thee that thou wast naked? You see, this is the message. This is what the myth means. It means that when we think that our nakedness, who we are, is unacceptable before God, that we must hide who we are from God, from ourselves, essentially. That is the separation. That is the thing that we're trying to repair, trying to heal through mythology and stories, and also through psychotherapy. Shame and guilt, I went on to write, are the forces that cause us to retreat from others, from help, and from needed support. We hide our humanness in the recesses of our unspoken selves, beyond the healing power of community. Exposing our whole selves to the light means a willingness to talk about and acknowledge it. And we need a safe context for that, a context where people won't recoil or shun. That is what we're seeking. We're seeking for a place to lay our head to rest, to be accepted and to be soothed. Of course, people that don't understand this, they are afraid that that kind of acceptance will breed selfishness, will breed hedonism, cruelty, greed. That's what we have been taught by the people that are afraid, that don't have this experience that I'm describing. But what one realizes, what one experiences in the context of this kind of acceptance, the kind that the famous Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard, when we experience that kind of welcome, we want to spend our lives giving that same feeling to everybody else. In the story of Les Mis, written by Victor Hugo, depicted in the musical that is now famous, when Jean Valjean was forgiven for stealing the silver by the bishop, he didn't go out and steal more. He experienced that grace, that forgiveness, that love, that compassion, born out of great capacity. He experienced that in such a way that that's all he wanted to do, and he spent the rest of his life trying to help disadvantaged people. That's what Victor Hugo was trying to show us. That's what the myths teach us. Carl Jung, Freud's student and protege and contemporary, he talked about the collective unconscious and archetypal patterns. His idea was that there are certain ways, certain things, certain themes that show up in our lives, in our stories and what we write and what we dream about, and the myths that we subscribe to and the myths that we perpetuate, that these themes, these stories speak to the shape of the human experience. And he focused on these patterns and how they affect our attachment and our relationship dynamics. And he saw the process of individuation, of becoming ourselves, not as a selfish drive, but as a courageous venture, as the courageous task born out of a sense of safety that is our psychological growth. He invited individuals to look at the shadow, the repressed parts of themselves, the parts of themselves that they relegated to the unconscious, under the bed, to the closet, because the context, the early context, deemed those parts inadmissible, unacceptable. It could be anger, could be one's sexuality, could be one's sadness or grief even, one's hurt, one's tears. When we repress, when we relegate those aspects of ourselves to the unconscious, they become the problem. They become monsters. They mutate. That's what Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is about. That creature, that monster, that demon, that antagonist is the lost self, the inner child, trying to reach us, trying to speak to us. Jung talked about in therapy about exploring these shadow parts, the parts that we repressed or denied, learning to recognize and integrating these aspects for greater self-awareness, greater wholeness, to become healthier. Similar to the insights brought about by behavioral chain analysis and NARM. Marcus Aurelius said that what stands in the way becomes the way. The symptoms that we bear, that the loved ones that we have bear, if we can remember to see them through this lens that I'm describing this evening, we will learn to find the lost child, the crying baby. See, the child that doesn't have its needs met doesn't just stop crying. It learns to stop feeling, because if that feeling of pain persists, it becomes intolerable. So they learn not to feel. And then those feelings come out sideways. They leak in destructive ways. I said to a few folks in my recent intensive, if you don't pay attention to the lost child, to the inner child, they will simply destroy your life, make it a mess until you pay attention. That's really what this is about tonight. Whatever's causing havoc in your life or the life of those that you love, that's the messenger. The thing that we have been taught to fear. That's why we call them our demons, our ghosts. We are taught to be afraid of them. But that fear is what put them in the shadow in the first place. We learn to love them. We learn to see and hear with different eyes and ears. And instead of seeing these symptoms as the enemy, we see them as a friendly message from the lost version of ourselves. I wrote some time ago that children act out when they can't or they don't know how to get their needs met. And then I remind the reader that we are all children. Rumi said that the cure for the pain is in the pain. The cure for depression is to learn to grieve, to feel the pain, to feel the unwinnable, the catch-22, to dive into it. In Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh says that we can adopt a dear one attitude. He suggested that you can talk to your depression or your anger just as you would to a child. You embrace it tenderly with the energy of mindfulness and say, dear one, I know you are there and I'm going to take care of you, just as you would with your crying baby. So when we facilitate inner child work, this concept of imagining that there's a part of you living inside of you that is a younger, wiser version of yourself, oftentimes the first instinct that people have when having a dialogue with this metaphorical part of ourselves, this inner child, is to lecture and to teach them. But just like it is with our real offspring, the healing balm is to listen, to attune, not to talk. We listen to our scarcity feelings when they come up. We listen to our rage when it shows itself in our lives. But of course, we've been told to hate those things. We really have. We have a temper and we've been told that's a bad thing. We drink too much and we've been told that's a bad thing. We wring our hands and express anxiety. We've been told that's a bad thing. When all of those behaviors can lead us back to ourselves. When we encounter feeling your inner child, we learn not to talk at them, but to listen to them. We can learn to say, I am here for you. I see you. I understand your fear, your pain, your suffering, and I will sit with you. This is how we heal. This is how we make friends with the wounds that lie beneath our symptoms. This is, as I say, the trail of crumbs that we follow back to the self. The Buddha said that hatred does not cease by hatred, only by love. This is the eternal rule. To hate symptoms, and I know symptoms are easy to hate. They cause a whole lot of turmoil. They cause their own level of destruction in our lives. Other people's, our children's symptoms cause destruction and distress to us and to their siblings. We know that. It's understandable. It's a human reaction. But in this way, we learn to transform our consciousness, to raise our vibration, to become more conscious and aware of what I'm teaching today, so that we learn to love and to see them. That's the difference between, for me, my role as a therapist and my base instincts because of my childhood, is that you can confess a whole lot of really incredible, outlandish things to me, and my response is going to be to be curious, to understand. And I can do that because somebody did it for me. These are quotes from my last broadcast, just the other day, from internal family systems theory. It's the same idea. The way we relate to our parts translates directly to the way that we relate to other people that resemble our parts. If I was not allowed to feel angry, I am going to be impatient with my child's anger. And James Hollis, an analyst, a Jungian analyst, said the truth about intimate relationships is that they can never be any better than the relationship we have with ourselves. That's why it's so important for therapists and parents to do their own work. You want a better marriage? Do your own work. You want to be a better parent? Do your own work. You have a child that's struggling with mental illness? Do your own work. You are the cure. You are the medicine. And in many ways, your child's behavioral issues are the end of a long line of messaging and trauma that is calling you back home. They are the ones saying, this doesn't work for me. We have to reevaluate the whole picture. You've accepted the wrong answers to life's most important questions. And what you think and take for granted, the unconscious obligations, have to be reconsidered, deconstructed. In The Journey of the Heroic Parent, when I was writing the chapter on behavioral theory, because you have to write a chapter on behavioral therapy, or excuse me, behavioral theory when you're talking about parenting, I wrote in the epigraph of that chapter, I wrote, using behavioral tools is fine, but only if they are nested in love and awareness. And we would be wise to listen, to first listen to what the behavior is telling us before we launch into changing it. And then I went on to write, we can use behavioral interventions to nurture, guide, and teach, to encourage our children. But we must also do our own work to make sure that we are attending to the needs of the child. Sometimes we listen to what they are not able to say. Sometimes the person that needs the most love and patience is the hardest one to give it to. We listen to what they are not able to say and provide them comfort. To do this, we follow the trail of crumbs back home to find the child. And often in finding the child, we discover our own wounding, our own childhood trauma that has gone unresolved and avoided. As children grow and mature, they expose the parts of ourselves that we have avoided, that we haven't dealt with. And when we follow this trail of crumbs back home and we find the child, we offer them company, our nervous system. We offer them warmth. And in essence, they heal themselves. So the take home is that the cure or the balm is the experience you have in community. We were wounded in relationship and we are healed in relationship. That could be a therapist, a 12-step support group, another kind of support group, a mentor, somebody that can hold space for us. This is done. We heal in safety. Safety is the treatment. It's not the precursor to treatment. Safety is the treatment. And when we just treat symptoms, because they can be very unbearable, it's akin to killing the messenger. Sometimes when we're trying to get rid of a symptom, I will say in a psychodrama, in an exercise at our intensives, I will feed the line to the person playing the inner child to say to the protagonist, to the adult, do you hate me? And what I'm saying is, can you listen to what I have to say, or do you just want to silence me? I know the way that I'm speaking to you through my substance use, through my overeating, through my sexual acting out, whatever it is. I know the way I'm speaking to you is really difficult to hear. But that is asking you to develop more capacity. Hating the symptom, despising the symptom, being frightened or disgusted by the symptom is essentially hating the message or even the messenger of the inner child. So we learn. We learn to forgive, not because it's a moral imperative, but we learn to forgive because that's the way that we heal. We learn to forgive because we can. We learn to forgive because it's our only chance at survival. Because then we can really see. Then we can really hold space for others. And ultimately, the way that I've learned this is because somebody showed it to me. I experienced this. And because somebody sat with my quote unquote horrible rotten self week after week after week, year after year, now I can sit with me. Now when I start to become symptomatic, I have a much better chance at hearing the crying baby inside of me, the crying child, the hurt, the insecure child. And because I can do that with myself, I can do that better with you and with my own children. I hope that was helpful. I hope that makes sense. If you want to learn more, my two current books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want an experience that illustrates this, that walks you through this, Finding You is that option. Our flagship program called Finding You. September 3rd is the next offering. September 19th is an online offering. And then again, the 1st of October, November, and December are the next offerings throughout the year. For inquiries, for private intensives, email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're looking for a therapist or a coach who can provide this kind of treatment, this kind of support, based and steeped in the knowledge that I've described tonight, reach out to our website or email us at that email address. We have support groups so that you can do this in community with your peers. The next available offering is September 17th. If you are an alumni, make sure you're getting that or go to our website to learn more. I'll be in New York in the fall, October 12th through 17th at the Omega Institute. And the name of the course, the name of the workshop is The Audacity to Be You. Go to the Omega website at eomega.org, click on the workshops tab, and then search for Audacity to Be You and get to work with myself and my daughter, Emma. I'm really looking forward to that. This Thursday, for our Inner Circle members only, will be an Ask Me Anything episode, so you can attend live. If you are a member or a non-member, you can send in your questions to info@findingyouprograms.com. That'll be this Thursday, August 28th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And then next week, a week from tonight, I'll be talking about family of origin, rules, roles, and repair. That is, that's the wrong date. That is September, I believe next Tuesday is September 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. Or September 3rd. Well, let's just say it's next Tuesday. Next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So I look forward to that. Any questions, any suggestions, any follow-up, you can always email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're looking for subscribing so you can attend these live broadcasts, check us out there. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And for those of you that are showing up, thanks for doing your work. Doing your work makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you on Thursday. Take care. Bye-bye.